Hi, it's Dwyer, GamblersAdvisory.com, DwyerBoxingNews.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Before I get into the fight prediction, let me just talk about briefly the situation involving doctors who have not examined Manny Pacquiao, have not looked at his chart, have not spoken with him, right? But yet, feeling a need to tell members of the media that they believe that Manny Pacquiao may be showing early signs of Parkinson's. All I can say is this. Any doctor's diagnosis is only as good as the materials that the doctor reviewed before making that diagnosis. If you haven't talked to Manny Pacquiao, if you haven't looked at his chart, all I can say is, give me a break. I'm going to throw a red flag on any doctor who is going to try to speak out of line without even examining the boxer. That's ridiculous. That's weak. Quite frankly, I've said too much on this subject already. I don't believe that story is worth your time. It won't be until a doctor comes forward after having reviewed a fighter's chart that any of us should give any credence to what that doctor is saying. And quite frankly, if the doctor has concerns over a fighter's chart, the person to talk with about those concerns is the fighter, not the general public. Just because someone puts on boxing gloves and boxes for a living doesn't mean that they have decided to give up all semblance of privacy. So that Manny Pacquiao story to me is a bunch of malarkey. It's weak. Quite frankly, I think Manny Pacquiao has been dissed. Okay, let's talk about Orlando Salido against unbeaten Mikey Garcia. You know, when you're at a pool, let's say you're one of these people who hangs out around pools, or maybe you were around a pool as a kid, and you remember when you looked at the pool and there was the 3 feet section of the pool for the kids, then you had the 5 feet section of the pool for people who wanted a safety net, wanted to know that their feet could touch the bottom of the pool. And then, of course, you had the daredevils over there in the 8 feet, right? The people who, thought they could swim, who didn't want to be burdened with, the floor of the pool, right? That 8 feet section, that's dangerous. Well, in my opinion, even though Mikey Garcia is unbeaten, even though his big brother is one of the best trainers in the sport and is doing an incredible job with people like Marcus Maidana as we speak, right? Even though Mikey Garcia, no doubt, has gotten great instruction and has been around some great fighters, right? That Oxnard gym has had people like Antonio Margarito, Sergio Martinez, Brandon Rios fight there. In other words, world-class guys, guys with belts, right? Even though Mikey Garcia has been around all of that, the way I see this fight is that Orlando Salido is going to take Mikey Garcia to the deep part of the pool. And I'm expecting Mikey Garcia to drown. All I can say is, forget records. Boxing's really about ability, right? Some of the fighters out there with a lot of losses, like Orlando Salido, are actually among the best fighters in the sport. Let's remember that Juan Manuel Marquez and Rafael Marquez lost fights early in their career, right? It's not where you've been, it's where you are. And when I look at Mikey Garcia, I see a guy who just looks too mechanical, doesn't let his hands go. Yes, he has power. Yes, he can knock anyone out. Yes, the minute you hear that Mikey Garcia is fighting someone, you need to hedge the play with Garcia by knockout. Right? No question about it. He does have a nice jab. He does have a nice right hand. But he's robotic. He moves, slowly. He's rigid. Right? Let me just say, just as a general rule, when rigid meets fluid, fluid usually wins. Right? Think about the great fighters out there. They're guys with explosiveness, fluidity. They're not rigid. Even the guys you think are rigid, like Vitaly Klitschko. When you actually watch him, you realize he's more fluid and lighter on his feet than you thought. Well, Mikey Garcia, I believe, is going to find out that his formula, right, guard, jab, right hand, his formula is not going to work against a guy who, quite frankly, I've long considered to be one of the smartest men in the sport of boxing. Right? Now, here's a warning. We're going to be talking about hooking. Okay? All I'm saying is this. Picture Danny Garcia. Right? And Danny Garcia is an up-and-comer. I'm the first to admit he's better than I expected. Right? But Danny Garcia is a mid-range hooker. And he's right in front of you, and he's relying on power and hand speed, right? So he's right in front of you. So you know where to find Danny Garcia. Even in fights where Danny Garcia blows out his opponent, like the American fight, right? Or like the second Eric Morales fight. Both Khan and Morales were able to land some straight punches on Danny Garcia. They're able to hit Danny Garcia with the jab because Danny Garcia is right in front of him, right? He's a mid-range hooker, right? He's willing to trade with you because mid-range hookers always feel they hit harder than you, right? He wants a shootout, but he can be found in the ring. You're not going to have Danny Garcia fighting off his back foot, bobbing, weaving. That's not him. He's going to be right in front of you. He's going to be throwing power shots, right? Now just imagine Danny Garcia, not now, but 5 years from now, right? When he figures out that he doesn't have to be right in front of you to be a successful mid-range hooker. He can actually play angles, right? He can actually be sneaky on the way in. Right? He can be a little bit farther away than right in front of you, even when he wants to hit you. And he can come in and kind of try to set it up. He can throw that lone body hook from distance without trying to throw a combination. Now just imagine if Danny, instead of being right in front of you, actually comes over so he's on the side of you. Just imagine if he can smother your jab. Just imagine if he can be a mid-range hooker where, because he's off at the side, he has punches coming right down the pike instead of, mid-range hookers allowing opponents to, turtle defense them, knowing that the shots will hit the arms. Just imagine if Danny Garcia were a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and knew how to creep up on you and then have the two-handed attack from off at the side. I don't say this lightly. Hardly anyone in the sport plays the angles better than Orlando Salido. Hardly anyone. Let me also say this too. If you want to see a fight that's a masterpiece, and there aren't that many, if you want to see a fight that's a masterpiece, it's on YouTube. They've wiped it from the books. It's Orlando Salido beating Robert Guerrero. And what's noteworthy when you look at that fight is how Guerrero, who has an excellent jab, and let me just point out, this is a different Guerrero than the tough guy Guerrero, who decided he wanted to test his chin against Selçuk Aydin and Andre Berto. This is a different Guerrero. This was the Guerrero who, wanted to actually look good in the ring without getting hit, right? Some guys know that they don't have to play tough guy, right? Younger Robert Guerrero, when he operated from distance behind a jab instead of with his head up on Andre Berto's shoulder, younger Guerrero fights Orlando Salido, and he has problems landing his jab. He literally gets overwhelmed by Orlando Salido. He can't keep Salido off of him. Now, there is a blueprint on how to beat Salido. There is. The way you beat a guy who's a master at angles, who tries to set up shop in the pocket where you can't hit him and he can unload on you, is when you have the foot speed and movement to continually change the angles. It's also when you have the hand speed and the power to literally just come in and lead with power shots and get Salido off the spot, right? You can't be methodical. You have to be fluid. You have to have power, leverage, hand speed, and movement. If you want to see how to beat Orlando Salido, look at his fight against Yorkis Gamboa. Let me just say, even though Mikey Garcia is unbeaten, he doesn't have those skills. Right? Gamboa, forget the power for a second. Gamboa's fast. Fast feet, fast hands, movement. Very hard to pin Gamboa. Right? Very hard, quite frankly, to find Gamboa. The only reason we don't really talk about Gamboa's elusiveness is because the power is such an eye-opener. Right? All I'm saying is, in a fight like that, Orlando Salido couldn't set up shop. Couldn't find that spot over his opponent's left shoulder where he could then just decimate the opponent like he did Juan Ma twice in Puerto Rico. Right? Like he did Robert Guerrero. Right? You can jab against Danny Garcia. I believe you can jab against Mikey Garcia, right? You can't rely on a jab against Orlando Salido, right? He has a knowledge of the sport that you really only get after fighting for several years. Let me say this. I'm expecting Orlando Salido to take over this fight and to start dominating it early. I'll be surprised if the winner of this fight isn't clear by the time this fight makes it to the later rounds, right? I thought Orlando Salido dominated Juan Ma twice. The first time, let's face it, the judges, who knows what was going on there. The scoring of the first fight is closer than it should have been. But of course, Salido left no doubt he closed the show. Right? If you can't move, if you're one of these guys like Mikey Garcia, who's mechanical and robotic, and you need to kind of like have your feet in certain places and you're moving, right? If you fight like Mikey Garcia / Kelly Pavlik, then in my opinion, you have little chance against Orlando Salido. The bet I'm recommending, and let me just say, I'm surprised the line's that close. The last time I looked at the line, Salido was just a 6-5 favorite. I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. So the way I'd play this is Salido to win the fight, straddled against Garcia by knockout. I believe Garcia, yes, he's unbeaten. Yes, he's younger. Yes, he's had some dramatic knockouts. I believe Garcia only has a puncher's chance of winning the fight. Let me just say this too, and I know this last line's going to get me in trouble, but Robert Garcia, who was known as Grandpa when he fought, was much more fluid than Mikey Garcia, right? I just get the feeling that the guys who are fluid, it's just something that comes to them. They just know how to be fluid. And I just feel that if you're really mechanical and stiff, it's very hard for people to loosen you up. After Bernard Hopkins beat Kelly Pavlik in the ring, just watch the HBO telecast, in the ring, after the fight, Bernard Hopkins, the mic catches him talking to Kelly Pavlik, and he says to Kelly, you need to be more slick. You need to bend your legs. You know, you need to move a little bit, right? The problem is stiff guys can't move. That's like trying to teach a stiff guy to dance, right? You either have the fluidity or you don't. I've watched several Kelly Pavlik fights since then, and Kelly Pavlik's still stiff. Right? Because keep in mind, a lot of it comes from anxiety and his own understanding of the sport. Right? He doesn't trust himself enough to let loose. So when he goes up against a fluid fighter like a Hopkins or like a Sergio Martinez, he's at a disadvantage because those other guys are adaptive reactive. Right? Those other guys aren't sticking to some limited stiff playbook. Here, what I believe is going to happen is I believe Mikey Garcia is going to come in. He's a young guy. He's unbeaten. I got to tell you, when you're a young unbeaten guy, I know there's that doubt in the back of your head. I mean, I know to the world you're, oh yeah, I'm the man. I'm unbeaten and stuff like that. But let's face it, Mikey Garcia hasn't exactly been fighting world-class competition. I'm sorry, but Bernabé Concepcion, give me a break. And so, you know, when he hops in with a guy who he knows has been in wars with people like Juanma, and understand the mental toughness of Orlando Salido, right? This is a guy who literally fights Juanma twice in Puerto Rico, right? This is a guy who's already faced Yorkis Gamboa, who's already faced Robert Guerrero, right? I'm guessing when Mikey Garcia gets to the third round against Salido and he realizes he can't land that right hand against Salido, and Salido's still there, he's still conscious, and he's still bringing it. I'll tell you what, I think stiff guys like this are more prone to crack. I like Orlando Salido in this fight. I'm hedging it since Mikey Garcia is a young lion with a punch. I'm hedging it with Mikey Garcia by KO. I think Mikey Garcia only has a puncher's chance in this fight. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.